Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving into the really intense relationship between discipline, power, and, well, freedom, I suppose. It's this dynamic tension that shapes so much, right? Personal habits, communities.
Absolutely. And we're using a fascinating flashpoint from history as our anchor. Paul's pretty sharp warning to the early church in Corinth. You find it in 1 Corinthians chapter 4.
Right. And the sources we looked at, they immediately zero in on this core conflict, don't they? With that really dramatic line.
The kingdom of God is not in word, but in power. Bang. That sets the stage immediately.
Yeah. It signals a major confrontation is coming because, well, the Corinthian church was facing a huge crisis. Authority issues, behavior issues.
Massive crisis.
Yeah.
And that's our mission for this deep dive, really.
Yeah.
Why did this church, which was, as we'll see, smart, wealthy, talented, why did it have such, frankly, poor internal discipline?
And we're not just talking about, following random rules. We need to unpack that critical difference the sources highlight between managing behavior with external stuff, rules, punishments, what the material calls heteronomy.
Right, like external restriction, talu.
Versus achieving that genuine internalized self-control, autonomy, or zilu.
It's really the heart of it, isn't it? Doing the right thing because you have to versus doing it because you are deep down convinced it is the right thing. Compulsion versus conviction.
That changes everything. So let's set the scene a bit more. Corinth, what was it like?
Oh, Corinth was not some sleepy backwater. The sources paint a picture of a huge, bustling, really wealthy metropolis.
Right, a major hub.
Exactly. Teeming with scholars, literature, trade, huge amounts of talent, very cosmopolitan.
But that success, it kind of backfired, didn't
It
it?
seems like it did. The sources point out that this wealth and talent fed a kind of massive pride within the church itself.
Yeah.
People started forming factions, arguing over who they followed, boasting about their own spiritual insights or gifts.
So the root issue was arrogance, pride.
Yeah, the sources use that term puffed up, swollen with self-importance.
Yep.
And it wasn't just quiet pride. They were actually boasting about their disobedience.
Wow. And the attack on Paul himself, that was pretty personal and, well, nasty.
Oh, very. They were openly disrespecting his authority, saying things like, he wouldn't even dare visit them in person.
Why? What was their reasoning?
They apparently thought he was all talk, like a barking dog, not a biting one, is the phrase used. They figured he could write tough letters, but wouldn't actually confront them face to face.
So they totally underestimated him.
Completely. They built this sort of faith culture based on, verbal sparring and fancy arguments of faith in word, as Paul puts it.
All talk.
And they assumed Paul operated the same way. But he makes it crystal clear his response isn't going to be another debate. It's going to be power and action.
He needed to cut through the chatter.
Exactly. Expose the sin that their actions revealed, demonstrate God's holiness in a way that went way beyond just words.
Okay, that's a serious wake-up call. But if talk fails and you have to resort to power, what's the aim of that discipline? Is it just about forcing people to comply? Punishment for punishment's sake?
That's a great question, and the sources offer a really important distinction here. Discipline, properly understood, isn't meant to crush or destroy. It's meant to shape.
Shape, okay.
There's this foundational concept mentioned. A child's will must be broken, but not destroyed.
Broken still sounds a bit harsh, doesn't it? Like, isn't there a risk there?
There absolutely is, if it's done wrong, without love or wisdom. But the analogy they use helps clarify the purpose of that breaking. Think about the thoroughbred horse example.
Ah, right. Tell us about that.
Okay, so you have this magnificent animal, a thoroughbred. Incredible power, speed, potential, right?
Sure.
But if it's completely unruly, untrained, its will totally undirected, that power makes it dangerous, it's useless, even a liability.
All that potential is wasted, or worse.
Precisely. Now, the process of training that horse, teaching it obedience, getting it to accept a rider's guidance that involves breaking its raw, wild will, but you're not destroying the horse's spirit or its power.
You're channeling it.
Exactly. You're redirecting that incredible potential so it becomes gentle, functional, useful. The spirit isn't crushed, it's focused.
Okay, I get that. So, applying that to Paul, his ideal wasn't to come in heavy-handed. The sources say he preferred gentleness, right? Teaching.
Yes, that was his preference, to guide them gently, teach them the right way. But their attitude, this boasting in their rebellion, it had hardened them.
So they kind of left him no choice.
It seems that way. He couldn't just keep making empty threats. Their failure to exercise autonomy, that internal self-control, made the demonstration of external authority, the power, pretty much unavoidable.
Which brings us right back to that core mechanism of how behavior actually changes, moving from that external force to something internal.
Yeah, from the stick to conviction, as you put it earlier.
So let's talk about self-discipline autonomy. So the sources point out something interesting about where it appears in Galatians, I think.
That's right. Self-control, or enkrateia in Greek, is listed as the final fruit of the Spirit in Galatians 5.
The last one. Why is that significant?
Well, the thinking is that it acts like a control mechanism, maybe. A governor for all the other positive traits.
Like a balancing valve.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. You might have amazing gifts, like generosity or knowledge. But without self-control, generosity becomes impulsiveness, knowledge becomes arrogance.
Okay, it keeps everything in check, used appropriately.
Right. A person who has this self-regulation is truly autonomous silu. They govern themselves from the inside out.
But, and this is the big but, when that self-regulation isn't there, or it's just not strong enough,
then heteronomy has to step in. External rules, restrictions, discipline. You need the law, the fine, the consequence to manage the behavior from the outside.
And the source gives that fantastic real-world example of this, the motorbike helmets in Taiwan.
Yes, it's such a clear illustration.
So what exactly happened there?
Okay, so before this law came in, wearing a helmet on a motorbike was optional in Taiwan.
And the results?
Tragic, really. A huge number of severe head injuries, deaths from accidents that might otherwise have been survivable. It was a major public health issue.
Right, so the government had to do something.
They did. They brought in legislation mandating helmet use, and crucially, they backed it up with a penalty of 500 new Taiwan dollar fine if you were caught without one.
Okay, so that fine, the $500, that's the heteronomy, the external branding.
Exactly. That's the initial driver. People started wearing helmets, maybe not because they suddenly had an epiphany about brain safety, but because they didn't want to get hit with that fine. Fear of the penalty compelled the behavior.
Makes sense. Avoid the punishment.
But here's the fascinating part, the outcome over time.
Yeah.
What started as compliance due to external pressure gradually shifted.
Well, so.
Well, the external rule, the constant reinforcement, it started to lead to internalized self-protection. Wearing a helmet just became the norm, the automatic thing to do.
So it wasn't just about the fine anymore.
Not primarily, no. It became about protecting yourself. The behavior shifted from fear of penalty to genuine self-preservation. The law actually helped foster autonomy in that area. It changed the culture around safety.
That's a perfect example of how external controls can sometimes eventually seed internal change. So if we connect this back to faith.
Yeah, the parallel is pretty clear. Believing in God might be a voluntary choice, but once you're part of that community, there are shared expectations, commands, ways of living.
Right. And the sign of maturity then is when your actions managing your time well, doing what you're supposed to do, controlling your tongue, come from that internal conviction.
Your autonomy, your zilu.
Rather than just, fear of getting caught or facing some kind of divine punishment, the 500 fine equivalent.
Exactly. If the only thing keeping you in line is the threat of penalty, have you really internalized the ethic? Probably not.
So, if external discipline is sometimes necessary, like the helmet fine, but internal self-control is the goal, how do we get there? The sources suggest shifting focus, right, towards prevention.
Yes, this is a really interesting point about leadership philosophy. They talk about prioritizing teaching and guiding over just reacting with discipline.
What's the difference in practice?
Well, think about it. Discipline, as it's often applied, is remedial. It happens after the rule is broken. It's punishment to correct a problem that already exists.
Okay, reactive.
Reactive, exactly. Whereas teaching and guiding is proactive. It's about leaders clearly, lovingly teaching God's ways first, establishing the norms, explaining the why behind them, setting clear expectations.
Making failure less likely in the first place.
Precisely. Leading with the why, not just the what happens if you don't.
The traffic light analogy they use makes this super clear.
It really does. Is it better to teach a child patiently? Look, red means stop, green means go. We follow this rule because it keeps you safe, and it respects everyone else trying to get where they're going.
Right. Explaining the reason, the benefit.
Or is it better to just let them figure it out, wait until they run a red light, cause an accident or chaos, and then punish them?
Obviously the first one. The teaching aims to prevent the need for the punishment altogether.
Exactly. And that proactive approach, leading with teaching and guidance, fosters what the source calls self-requirement, or maybe self-ordering. Zisu.
Meaning what?
Meaning that people start to regulate themselves based on understanding and conviction. Actions then come from a place of, ideally, reverence for God, a desire for holiness, a genuine buy-in to the community's values.
Not just ticking boxes or following rules out of fear.
Right, obedience becomes a willing, maybe even joyful response to God's love and character. If we lead effectively with teaching, the need for that heavy-handed disciplinary correction should theoretically decrease, because people move from being externally controlled to internally self-governed.
Wow, okay, that really brings it all together. A true deep dive into power, control, and how we change. We've looked at that contrast between empty word versus real power in leadership.
And we trace that psychological path from external restriction, like the fine, towards internalized self-discipline.
And highlighted that crucial shift in focus from reactive, remedial punishment towards proactive teaching and guidance.
And the sources really bring this home personally, asking you, the listener, to reflect. Where in your own life do you struggle with self-discipline? Maybe it's time management, finances, how you speak, what you consume. What areas are hardest?
Yeah, and maybe asking, where are you still relying on that external pressure, that 500 fine, whether it's an accountability partner, fear of being found out, social pressure, when really the goal is internal conviction, growth from the inside?
It's a challenging question.
It really is, and it leaves us with this final, maybe provocative thought to mull over. Connects back to Paul and the Corinthians, but it's for all of us today.
What's that?
If we took away the penalty,
Yeah.
completely removed the threat of consequences, divine or otherwise, if obedience had zero risk attached, how much of your current good behavior, your self-control, would actually remain?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
How much is driven by genuine reverence, by love, by a desire for holiness, and how much is just, fear of the fallout, something to definitely reflect on as you go about your week.